so let me go ahead and get started with our program. Hello, everybody. I'm Spike Radway, the Director of Programming for the Cleveland Digital Publishing Users Group. The title of our program is protecting your digital assets too crazy, with an exclamation. Jim has worked at DriveSavers for almost 2 decades. DriveSavers recovers data from hard drives and other storage media that have crashed, mechanically failed, experienced physical damage, and worse. DriveSavers is Apple Authorized with Apple certified Mac data recovery engineers, and they also have similar kind of credentials with for Windows. So I did ask Jim to talk more about the Mac part of this. Most of our Macs are Mac users, or our members are Mac users, but they also are authorized with the storage manufacturers as well. I kind of came up with this myself because LaCie was in the process of retiring, and it's a really comprehensive, very lots of services kind of business. So I don't think I did justice, but that's what Jim's here for. Jim can actually tell us all. He's going to tell us all about protecting your digital assets and what DriveSavers does, and then we'll have a conversation about that and about backup. So Jim, why don't you go ahead and I guess you can correct the pronunciation of your name if I mispronounce it as well too, I guess.
Sure.
And why don't you go ahead and tell us about DriveSavers and do your thing.
Great, thank you, Spike. Welcome everybody. So my name is Jim Wilhelmsen, and I'm the operations manager here at DriveSavers. I've been here for 17 years, a little over 17 years. I've worked in most aspects of this company. So I've done sales, I do tech support, I've done engineering and R&D, and now I focus on our database and our processes to make sure that both our customers are experiencing the best experience possible, as well as our engineers and everybody internally can process as efficiently as possible. So what I'd like to do is first, we have a really great, some of you may be familiar with Linus's Tech Tips. We had him out here a while back, and he did a really fantastic video that gives you a great tour of our company and who we are and what we do, and it's entertaining to watch. It's about 12 minutes long. So I would like to do that first, and then I can be lovely to just answer some questions, and let's just kind of do this presentation based off of information you guys would like to know. So if that all sounds good, or if you have any questions you want to start with, I'd be happy to answer them now, or we can jump into the video and then do some questions after.
Are there any questions people have, or should we let Jim get started with what he wants to show us?
I have a quick question.
Okay,
sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Is there any way around, like, that they can make these things so that water doesn't destroy information?
Well, they've done that with the iPhones already. So the iPhones are, unless you have a crack or, they're well sealed, right? But if you drop your phone or you get slight cracks in there, then water will find its way in. Some of the components are well epoxied and sealed to prevent themselves from doing that, but there are millions of little, or not millions, but thousands of little components on the phone, and any one of them that goes bad could be a failure. MacBooks and Mac Pros are starting to be designed similar to the way an iPhone is. So the logic boards inside MacBooks these days are getting smaller and more integrated. So all the software or all the storage is embedded on the motherboards these days. And the motherboards look almost like an iPhone board these days. And it's almost all battery in your computer, is what's taking up all the space. So they're getting there, but water's a tough one when you have moving parts like keyboards to fully get cleaned out. So.
Are there any third-party products for hardening Macs, or are there? I imagine for Windows, there probably are machines you can buy that are already hardened for that kind of thing.
I know there were companies like Toshiba, I think, used to make Toughbook, and there are some companies that do that. I'm not totally aware of anybody doing that with Apple computers, or if there's third-party cases you can put around them. But I would imagine I know there used to be a nanotechnology. You could send out your computers for this nano, what was it? It was like a nano coating you could do that would basically waterproof your electronics. I haven't heard about that in a while. I don't know if that's still a thing, but that was kind of popular and in the technology for a while.
There are plastic covers for keyboards. I don't know if those would help for some things. I'm happy, Chris, if you need one, I'll buy you a sippy cup. So that's what I usually tell people that have accidents, like to buy a sippy cup, it's cheaper.
Yeah. Basically, if you separate your work life from each other, then you'll probably be okay. So
You'll be able to learn that once.
Yeah. Okay, all right, any more questions, or was that satisfactory for you, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so any other questions before Jim starts? All right, go for it, Jim.
all righty. Let me see. Not seeing in my window. There it is.
You'd never know it from the outside, but in there, through those doors, is one of the world's oldest and most advanced data recovery companies. DriveSavers headquarters here in Novato, California, features almost 100 employees, almost that many security certifications, and a $2 million ISO 5 clean room. And they sponsored us down here to have a close look at how it is they take this and turn it into this. So let's go inside. We're gonna kick things off in the museum. As long as our escort says that that's okay. Security is a huge deal at DriveSavers, not just on the outside of the building, but also throughout it. So guests get these incredible badges that actually change color over time, eventually turning red, so that anyone who sees it will know to kick me out or call the cops. And everything in here is on a need to access basis, with biometric security on secure spots and annual background checks for all staff members. So these guys have recovered data from pretty much everything that you would normally think of. Hard drives, phones, laptops, SSDs, and from a lot of things that you probably wouldn't think of. Defibrillators, photocopy machines, and even a TiVo. So the museum here contains many of their biggest success stories, both in terms of the importance of the data that was recovered. They once saved Twisted Sister's Christmas album and 12 episodes of The Simpsons, including the conclusion of the Who Shot Mr. Burns cliffhanger during a national contest to guess who did it, and in terms of the difficulty. So, run over by an 18-wheeler? Check. Lit on fire? Check. Buried in a mudslide? Check that too. This one that you're looking at right now was actually pulled from a sunken cruise ship after sitting underwater for 2 days. It had the owner's memoirs successfully recovered from it. Now, let's talk about how they do it. Consultation and, in some cases, even diagnosis with an analysis of what data they expect to get back is free. So you send in your drive where shipping sorts it into a colored bin according to the priority of the job and the cleanliness of the drive or device. And you might think to yourself, oh, come on, it's a hard drive. How dirty could it be? But they've actually had to obtain a Geiger counter to evaluate the radioactivity of drives coming out of nuclear disasters. And through some of their forensics work, they've even seen devices come through here that were found on murder victims. One phone apparently had the camera element gouged out before being placed back on the victim's body in an apparent attempt to get rid of the photos. So yeah, DriveSavers got that back. Good work, idiot. Hope prison's treating you well. From shipping, your bin travels to one of a few different places, and we'll go through those in a minute, but everything will eventually get the cloning treatment. And that starts here. DriveSavers keeps a huge inventory of spare, wiped donor drives because you dramatically improve your chances of recovery if you're working with a bit-for-bit digital copy of your data set. It gives you the time to analyze more than just what files were there and then dig into who accessed them, when, what did they do. These kinds of things can be particularly important in cases of corporate intellectual property protection, for example, where there might have been some attempt to destroy data or cover up a data access. The folks in this room also do the initial analysis of RAID arrays using software tools like the one you're looking at here to rebuild the array logically and determine which drives are probably working fine versus which ones will likely need physical repairs before making a cloning attempt. And they've got the hardware for everything from reconstructing a 4-drive home NAS array to this over here. This is a 45-drive JBOD that's on standby waiting for, I don't know, maybe another 96-drive server that got gallons of water dumped on it due to a sprinkler system malfunction. Because yeah, that was a thing that happened. But as you saw in the museum, a lot of the hard drives that come through here need a lot more than a little bit of software reconfiguring. So, welcome to the clean room. Or strictly speaking, this is the inventory room and the clean room is on the other side of the glass, but this stuff's cool too. In here, they've got basically every hard drive you could imagine. They've got 2.5 inch, they've got 3.5 inch, they've got the latest helium sealed drives, and all the way from the latest to look at these clunkers. I mean, look at this. This is called a mini scribe. I guess, you know, relative to this guy, it is pretty mini. But basically the point is, whatever the text on the other side of the glass inside that ISO 5 clean room, so that is less than 100,000 0.1 micron particles per cubic meter, 10,000 times cleaner than a normal room. Whatever they need, they put a request onto this little cart, it comes out here, we load it up, we fire it back in there, and whether it's a brand new drive or an ancient one, they start the process of rebuilding one working drive from the donor and the recipient. Now, they did put away some of the proprietary equipment that they use. For example, they found a way to work on helium sealed drives, which won't function at all in regular air that's 7 times more dense. And so they wouldn't show us, like, I don't know, how they either reseal them or put them in a helium chamber or something, but this place is still incredible. So thanks to the 34 filtered fans, air is circulated in here so quickly that it's not only clean, but they can actually do soldering work anywhere in this room without disrupting anyone else's sensitive recovery operation. Incredible! And an operation it is. They actually agreed to let us do an actuator swap, so stay tuned for that video because I'm super stoked for you guys to see it. Anyway, for now, let's continue our journey. So then, with the drive physically working, I mean, it's copying data, they can just send it back to you, right? Wrong. So this guy right here is working, but it is not reliable. DriveSavers wouldn't be able to keep their warranty-approved service status with every major hard drive vendor for very long if they pulled that kind of a stunt. So the next step then is logical recovery, where maybe not all, but some of the data should be recoverable even in cases of severe physical damage like we saw downstairs in the museum. And we're going to head over there. But first, we need to make a quick stopover in Flash Memory Town. Now, hard drive recovery is complicated. Flash memory? Oh, well, that's a whole other ballgame, son. So what you're looking at here is raw ones and zeros off a flash chip. So you can think of it kind of like a QR code, except that there is no app for your phone to read it, and making matters even more difficult, this middle spare area part right here, well, that contains information about where the block numbers are, where your ECC belongs, etc. Really good stuff. Except, oh wait, that gets intentionally scrambled in many cases as a security measure. So figuring out which bytes are bad And getting the whole thing to turn green takes a lot of knowledge, and then to do it quickly takes years of experience. And even getting it to that point isn't trivial in many cases. Flash memory chips require proprietary, not to mention expensive readers, and they come from devices that don't always want to give them up easily, including everything from standard Apple or M.2 SSDs in computers to camcorders, MP3 players, like what year is it, I know, right? And even bare flash chips that are soldered onto the motherboard, like in some of the latest MacBooks. Thank you, Apple. And the craziest part is, coming back to device security again, on a device with a security module, like an iPhone, for example. So you can see in this footage, they're taking apart an iPhone 10 for us that might later be used as a known good for a customer recovery attempt. You could actually need at least 4 components to even hope to pull data off of it. The NAND flash itself, which needs to be desoldered from the board, and the baseband IC, the controller, which you can actually see from this disassembled A8 chip, actually sits under the RAM with contacts on the top and bottom, and the ROM. So 4 parts, which means that if you were to hope to pull data from a badly damaged one of these, you would need to desolder, clean, reball, and resolder all of these 4 components successfully to a donor phone. And did I mention, by the way, that even the couple generations old A8 processor already had 1,100 contact points. So they apparently haven't attempted an operation like this with the 10 yet, but they think that it might be possible. Finally, we're in logical land. Now, stuff without any physical damage to the hard drive itself may end up coming straight here, like, let's say, for example, you plugged the wrong power supply into your external drive enclosure like this, and it released all of its magic blue smoke. Pella. He actually sent this drive to DriveSavers 4 years ago, but ended up opting not to go forward with the recovery service. So as you can see from what we pulled off of this drive, it's clear that for some people, it's not necessarily going to make sense necessarily to pay for data recovery if all you've got that's not backed up somewhere is clips from a Cheech and Chong live concert. With that said, even around here at DriveSavers, where their bread and butter is failed or corrupted devices, they still absolutely preach the principles of data backup. Because the cold hard truth is, even if you are an extremely skilled data recovery engineer, there are still things that can take out your storage permanently. So I think a perfect example of that is our host today, Mike, ended up losing pretty much all of his data in the Santa Rosa fires. So even though he's an executive here at DriveSavers, there was nothing he would have been able to do about that if he hadn't had an off-site backup. So at the end of the day, that's the takeaway, guys. Make backups of your data. The 3-2-1 principle should never be ignored, but in the event that something goes terribly wrong, DriveSavers has got your back. I want to thank them for making this video possible. I want to thank you guys for watching, and you can check out the link to DriveSavers in the video description. Yeah, no, I think I can do it, no problem this time. Okay.
You get better angle to see.
Okay.
All right. So that is a tour of our company and some of the capabilities and the things. Now, you saw them talking about the iPhone 10, so that was done about 4 years ago or so. We have improved our abilities to recover from iPhones tremendously since that time. And so what he was saying would be something we thought we might be able to do. Well, we do it pretty regularly these days. So we have a lot of new technologies, including we're using X-ray technology now to look not only into the circuit boards, but into the chips themselves, where we can see failures and damages and know where we might target things. We can even look directly into an iPhone without even opening it to see if there's any corruption, corrosion or damage and stuff like that. So Does anybody have any questions right now or any specific things you want me to direct this presentation towards?
Well, I thought the video was great. I looked for a few as I was working with Lindsay, or at least when she was in the process of retiring, so I didn't really talk to her. And that was like much better than what I found, kind of, I think, on the DriveSavers YouTube page. So that was nice to see the inside tour. I have a couple questions. Like, can you tell us about the data recovery for John and Yoko?
For John and Yoko, I actually don't know the story about that one particularly. I know I've seen the pictures for it. I'm sorry about that one. I don't know that one. Other ones I do know, we've done Willie Nelson a couple of times. I remember Sean Connery, I believe, was on an airplane and the airplane hit turbulence and he was working on his laptop and that turbulence caused the laptop to shake and vibrate and damage his hard drive. And so we did that recovery. There was the cruise boat is one of our more famous ones that he showed in that video where a woman was on a cruise in the Amazon and the boat sunk and she was an amateur diver and she actually dove down to the cruise ship, found her stateroom and retrieved her laptop from that boat and then sent it to us for recovery. We had a weather review. There was a weather balloon from, I want to say, University of Michigan, but I can't remember which one of the colleges. There was a weather balloon down in Antarctica that had crashed, and the hard drive drug across the ice for many, many miles, and damaging the hard drive. So they sent that to us for recovery as well. We've had countless server rooms that have had floods, and it seems like everybody puts their server rooms in a basement. And so then it floods and the basement fills up and all the data gets damaged in their server rooms.
So who picked the pictures of Olivia Newton-John and Spock? Is there a story about that one?
That was just our joke when we were deciding which side of the room was doing logical and which one was doing physical. And so Spock represented logical and Olivia Newton-John from Let's Get Physical was the physical side. So that's just having fun.
Yeah, so I like that one. So what is a typical, typical restore or recovery like that? What's more normal? What's like the normal day-to-day stuff that comes through?
So we get an increasingly large amount of iPhones is a really big sector. Whether they're dropped or they go into boot looping modes. So we do a lot of physically damaged iPhones, whether they're dropped. I mean, we had one that was dropped 11 stories down an elevator shaft and was broken into little pieces, and they sent us all the pieces. And because we now are capable of migrating the relative chips to a donor board to recover data, we got a full recovery off of that.
That's amazing.
How much of the recovery is Mac, Windows, and then mobile, I guess? And like, are you still getting regular hard drives, or is everything solid state?
We do still, so hard drives still are the lion's share of our recoveries, but dwindling. SSDs are increasing as well as the iPhones. I think our latest makeup had probably 70% of our recoveries were still spinning hard drives. But that's starting to shrink and it's shifting towards SSDs. And so we never thought we would still be in business with SSDs and iPhones the way that they're built and encrypted and structured, but we keep innovating and finding new methods to get through these things. And the SSD business has been incredibly successful. iPhones are wildly successful these days. And so the future is looking good. We're still able to get this stuff recovered.
How much of, can you tell us a little like what the process would be for an end user from intake to completion? Because that I'm kind of familiar with, which the back room stuff. I just know about the bunny suits in the clean room, but I didn't really know exactly how that went. So can you tell us what the process is like. So if someone from CDPUG, happens to drop their iPhone down an 11-story elevator tomorrow or something like that, what would be besides, and do you still have grief counselors on staff? That's one of the things I always told people, but I don't know if that's still true.
I'm sorry, if we had what on staff?
Grief counselors.
We do, yes. So, really, our technology is amazing. We're able to do so many great things, and it's fun to talk about that and show it. But the success of DriveSavers has been our customer service all along. And what sets us really apart from almost any other company is the way we treat our customers. And so we have over 17,000 referral partners across the world. And so just about absolutely any Apple store that you walk into, as well as almost any other computer support store that you would walk into, is probably a partner of ours. And so if they're not able to recover the data in the normal manners, then they'll probably refer you to us. And when you call us, we're available 24/7 on the phones. You'll always get a live person, and you'll speak with an agent who can talk you through all the different steps of exploring your loss, what the failure was. Certain cases we can identify over the phone that it's just not recoverable. Like if you reformatted your iPhone or reformatted a Mac SSD, unfortunately, that's not a recoverable scenario. And so we'll explore what happened, what's important. We'll give you a really large ballpark ID, but DriveSavers offers free shipping. We offer a free evaluation. So all you need to do is call us. We'll give you a free FedEx label. You'll send it to us. Our engineers will evaluate to see what we think the chances of recovery are. There's no cost. We'll then call you with an evaluation and what that cost might be. And then it's up to you to decide whether that makes sense to you. And if the value of your data is worth the cost of recovery, then we'll move forward with it. And if you decide that it's not worth that, then there's no charge, and we'll send it back to you, no cost at all. So just to even find out if we can recover it is a free event. And, we always want to help you out as best we can. So once you have made that phone call and you've sent it to us, we'll give you the FedEx label. We'll give you all the information that you need. The drive arrives to us. You get notification that it's arrived to us. Within a day or two, we'll call you with the result of the evaluation. And then when you move forward with us, we have 3 different services. We can do a 24-hour round-the-clock service, 1 to 2 business day service, and then our economy service, depending on the device, is either 5 to 7 business days or 10 to 14 days. We also do enterprise grade stuff, so all the multi-drive RAID systems, if you have any of those or enclosures. Once we've done the recovery, we call you with the results, and then we ship it all back on an external drive. And then we have a whole slew of support videos on our website to help you reintegrate your data onto your computer. And if you're still not able to do that and have questions, then you can call us back, and we provide support on the back end in assistance to restore some data sometimes, depending on what it is. And our engineer, our customer service is there to address any issues that you might have with the recovery after it. So even after we've sent the data back to you, it's not the end of our relationship. If you still need us, we're here for you. And that's how DriveSavers works.
How often does data come back with the file and folder structure, and how often is it just, like you have file 0001.jpg and you have to figure out what that is?
Yeah. In most situations, we get the structure back. So our goal is to get the directory and get that back. Most of the time when we're not able to get that, it's either there's a lot of damage physically to the device, or we were dealing with a deletion scenario that deleted the directory structure. But even if we are sending you back the data without the directory information, well, our processes have been able to go through and read the metadata of those files. So for JPEGs, PDFs, Word documents and such, we can label them with dates. So your pictures still come back with a date structure. Your Word documents come back with their last save dates on them and PDFs of when they were created. So we do try to put back as much structure, usable structure as we can, even in those generic scenarios. But our first goal is to always get back the directory structure, and that's usually what we get back.
What should users do beforehand and what should they not do? Like what is reasonable for someone to try to recover before, you know, the possible large expense from DriveSavers, and at what point should they stop so it's not harder for you to recover it?
So if you are someone using a spinning hard drive or a disk, if you hear any noises, sounds coming from the drive, those are usually the heads on the platters. So turn it off. Don't use it anymore. That if you hear clicking sounds or noises coming from the drive, that's not something a local user is going to be able, or a local company is going to be able to repair. That needs to get into a clean room and handled by professionals, because the more you turn that on, the more damage you're going to do to the platters. And if someone else is trying to run a utility against it, it's just going to make it all worse. Generally, you want to just, the less you do, the better. So we're rarely the first phone call. You're usually going to go to a local place first, or might try something on your own. And most of our partners know the signs of when they can try something or when they should not touch it any further, to make sure that we have the greatest chance for recovery. So it's hard to say exactly what to do or not to do, but I can just tell you the less you do, the better your chances are for recovery. And the sooner you call us. So deletion, when we're, it sounds like most of you are Mac users these days. Almost all Macs are SSDs. And when you delete something from an SSD, unfortunately, it is gone immediately, or at least when you empty it from the trash. So the way that SSD technology works, it recycles the cells in there. It's called garbage collection. And then there's a feature called trim that gets added to to kind of push that garbage collection along a little bit faster. But to wear level an SSD to make sure that all the cells within an SSD wear evenly, and so you don't lose, so you get the maximum use out of an SSD. It's constantly recycling these cells as they get used. And so when you delete something, the cells are instantly put into the garbage collection for reuse. And so there's unfortunately no data recovery that can be done on a Macintosh OEM SSD. So
are Windows SSDs the same?
So Windows SSDs, we don't turn away immediately, because if it was built in with Windows 7, then usually the trim is enabled. But if it was an aftermarket or a lower end, there's so many variables with Windows. Mac is very, you buy a Mac, you got a Mac, you know what it is, and it's not made by somebody else. With Windows, there's hundreds of different makers, and they all have different ways and philosophies of setting it up. And so there is the potential that trim hasn't run, or they're using a lower end SSD, and we might have an opportunity to delete something. Also, Windows deletes things differently than Mac does. And so the way that a Macintosh stores its catalog and deletes stuff, it's much more volatile and difficult to recover from if it's deleted. Windows flags things a little differently, and it doesn't really get deleted until you overwrite that sector. So deletion is different with Windows than it is with Mac. All the more reason to make sure you're backing up using Time Machine, using iCloud, using other backup services when you have a Mac.
Okay, so far I've been asking lots of questions, but I've always been kind of curious, and I've worked with DriveSavers in the past. In fact, I don't send you a lot of referrals, but I am a partner, so I can get I have a code that helps, like if anyone from CDPUG needs I guess slightly more favorable pricing, I can give them a code for that. And
Excellent.
So I do a lot of nagging for backups, because it's a lot cheaper to do a backup than it is to do a recovery. So I guess, Bill, I know we talked about this before, so maybe before we talk about backup, Jim, maybe I have Bill can tell us a testimonial, Bill Corrali, who's here over Zoom, and then I can tell a testimonial for Billy Barona from Flex Media, who couldn't make it, but he was supposed to send me something in writing. So, but I can tell you what happened to him. So I can tell 2 testimonials.
Sure.
So you want to go ahead, Bill?
I'm not sure what you're asking me to do, but I did want to ask her, the SSDs, I was shocked when this happened to my daughter because I thought Macs were, they have a reputation of being, really solidly built. She actually had a plastic cover around it, but I guess there were holes along the side, and she said that it was a relatively small amount of water that got on the keyboard, but it destroyed the computer almost immediately. And is that relatively typical, or is she telling me something and maybe there was a lot more water than she wants to admit to me?
How long ago was this?
Like I said, it was probably a 2017 or an 18 or something like that, and it was just a few months ago, maybe 2 months ago,
It's probably
That
less
she-
than that.
possibly even less than that. Yeah,
That we did the recovery?
you were not able to
You-
do a recovery. You looked at it and you said it just couldn't be done. I assume that the water burnt everything out. I mean, the computer itself.
Well,
stopped
water's,
working
yeah,
almost
water
immediately.
water is a great nemesis to electronics, right? And the problem with water, even if it's a small thing, is it can hide underneath chips. And when people, typically try to dry it out, or, there's the whole rice theory that you could put it in rice and that'll absorb water out, which really doesn't work. But, sometimes water will hide, even little drops of water will hide in there. And if it's, water is conductive. And so if it's sitting between a couple of the right pins of a chip and you apply power to it, which power is always applied to a laptop, right? You can't really remove power from it because of the battery. Then it can short out, the chip. And so depending on what it shorts out, if it shorts out the NAND, which is where it stores all the data, or if it shorts out the CPU, a lot of these chips are signed to each other. And so we can't just put on a new CPU necessarily, or a new part, because a lot of these parts are all ID'd to each other and talk to each other. And so if the right part gets damaged or shorted out, then unfortunately we can't get access to it. But the problem is every case is different, so it's hard to really generally say that water spill. I mean, we do water recoveries all the time, and we're greatly accessible, but depending on where that water hit and what it affected and what it burned out, affects whether we will be successful or not.
I found that a lot of users, they tell me they're backed up, and then when their computer dies, they're not really backed up. And I recommend, I think some of it is wishful thinking, or they don't really spend the time knowing how to do backup right, or that it's the main thing about backups is you should always have fire drills to make sure that you actually can recover the data. So I did have one client that was actually was a pretty big ad agency. The backup wasn't running properly, but no one ever tested it, so they didn't know until the server died, and then they lost all their files. I don't know if they did a successful recovery, because I didn't want to know. I wasn't involved in that project, but I didn't want to be collateral damage for that. So I know for Bill's daughter, it was, maybe wishful thinking. It was really more water than she thought, or hit the wrong chip. So and I guess the price that was quoted for Jessica was $3,000 for the data recovery. At least that was the estimate before they found out that they couldn't succeed. So that would have, between the computer and the data, that would have been a $6,000 mistake. And you can do a time machine backup with a $50 hard drive. So it's a pretty reasonable investment in doing backups. The
Yeah,
other story I can tell you is Billy Barona from Flex Media, who most of you know, who's presented to us in the past. Billy actually offered it to like be a testimonial, which I was a little surprised, because normally like I would, like if someone's not backed up, they don't want to talk about it. So that's kind of to his credit. He was backed up, but not completely. So he did, he found like there was like just the perfect storm with some data that he was doing for clients, and one of his drives, the drive just mechanically failed. It wasn't anything that he did wrong. And he ended up paying $3,000 for data recovery, and he was glad he did, because as soon as the data came back, clients started asking for some files that he wasn't sure that they would need. So it was in a business investment that he didn't want to make, but he did, and now he has improved his operations in order to protect that kind of those files going forward. So I guess, so Jim, so that's the story about Billy from Flex Media. Jim, can you maybe now that we've scared people with some like shock probation kinds of things, can you make your own recommendations for backup?
sure. So both Mac and PC or Windows have their own built-in backup systems. And so on the Mac, it's Time Machine, and on Windows, it's a system, it's called File History in the backup system. They both work pretty similar to each other, in where it'll make a complete backup, and then it does incremental backups like hourly, as long as you have the drive connected. So both of those systems do require you to have physically attached a device for it to back up to. You can do that to a wireless NAS system. The problem with wireless NAS, which is like a time capsule, which I don't think they make anymore actually, but if you remember the time capsules, one of the biggest issues we had with time capsules is that it backed up over the Wi-Fi connection. But if your Wi-Fi connection went out, which is quite common, then the backup wouldn't complete. Also, if your Wi-Fi connection had a lot of packet loss or was slow, it may not complete a backup as well. So many people thought they were being backed up because of this system going, and turned out they weren't, because there was always Wi-Fi internet connection issues. So what I typically tell people, particularly with laptops these days, is to use either the Time Machine or the system backup with your USB drive that you've connected to your computer, and keep that drive with your power supply on your desk. Most people are mobile with their computer, but at least once a day, they have to plug it in to charge. And so if you make that just a habit of plugging in your external drive and plugging in your power charger at the same time as a single action, then at least once a day, you will always get a backup, and just let it back up overnight when you're not using your computer. And then worst case, you would be out a day's worth of work if you did that. In addition, both Apple and both Apple and Windows have cloud backups. So Windows has OneDrive and Mac has iCloud. Now they can get a little weird in the way they back up. So Apple's iCloud backups will back up your desktop and your documents folders completely. But when you get into stuff like photos, the iCloud communicates directly with the Photos program, not with the Pictures folder. And so as long as you're using the Photos app in Mac, then it can synchronize with your iCloud. And then, but if you're just dumping your pictures into the Pictures folder, that folder doesn't get backed up with iCloud. And so you have to understand how iCloud works, because it works primarily directly with applications as opposed to locations on your computer. But if you put everything in your desktop or your documents, then that can synchronize to iCloud. It's also can be dangerous, because if you start dumping really large files onto your desktop or documents, your iCloud can really bog down and slow down your computer while it's trying to upload all those files into the iCloud. So you really need to be conscious about how iCloud works and how you're using it. The system pretty much works the same with Windows. Windows doesn't do it as application-based. It is more folder-based. And so I think by default gets the main library folders, like the desktop documents. I believe it does do the pictures folder, and they go into the OneDrive folder and they can synchronize up to that. Both of those services offer for free, a very small amount of data, like 5 gigabytes. So you need to pay for a service to make sure you have enough capacity to make sure all that data is going up there. We've seen with iCloud where if you exceed the amount of space that you're paying for, your data is actually still going up into the cloud, but you don't have access to it because you haven't paid for that space. So even though iCloud might be synchronizing with data that's exceeded the space, you won't be able to get to it until you pay for the next level of storage. And then it can become available as well. I think you have there's a 2 terabyte limit with Apple, and there's no way to go any bigger than that. So you'd have to use multiple accounts or find some other service if you're someone who stores a lot of data beyond 2 terabytes. And then that moves into some other backup services, kind of like Backblaze, or I think Carbonite's still around. There's a lot of other cloud services that have unlimited amount of storage for the service that you're paying for. And those can work really good. They're really designed for just a full backup of the computer. iCloud's really more for the ecosystem and making data available through your iPad and iPhone and your computer, and it's all connected and working, where these other cloud backups are just for making a backup of your device. And it's a great safety. The biggest problem with cloud backups is if you do need to use them to restore to a computer, it can be quite slow because you have to pull everything down from the internet, as well as pushing up to the internet. Most people's has a asynchronous, is that right? It's asynchronous internet connection, and your upload speeds are usually pretty slow. And so if you have a lot of data that you're pushing up, it can take a really long time for that data to get up to the cloud. And so I like using a combination. Always have a physical hard drive as your main backup source, and then use cloud as a secondary backup source and for convenience. And then if you're really going to get on top of it, you can put as many drives as you want on Time Machine. And you can do this kind of a cycle where maybe every week you keep one drive at the office and you have one drive at home, and then once a week you swap them. And so then you'd be worst case out a week's worth of data, but you're swapped them. So if you have a house fire or a theft or something like that, one of those drives is safe, or put it in a safe or a safety deposit box. People do all kinds of stuff like that.
We say you should have one for the summer palace and one for the winter palace.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Time Machine. So the thing that I've noticed with iCloud is that somehow there's 200 gigabytes is $3 and 2 terabytes is $10. And somehow that $7 just like flips people out.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it is a big difference. There should, be nice if there was a number halfway in between there, like between 200 gigabytes and 2 terabytes, but still it's a lot less expensive than an expensive data recovery.
Especially when they sell you a 256 gig drive, but you can only get a 200 gig service. It's like you're almost there, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a complaint that Apple should provide a little bit more storage for free. They should match the size of your device.
I'll tell you, everybody that I've helped with after a data recovery, that $10 a month doesn't even faze them after doing a data recovery. So, yeah.
Right. There's a question from Henry here in the audience.
Actually, it's more of a statement. I just want to let you know there are very distinct differences between the 3 different types of backup. One drive will get all your files, but it doesn't back up your operating system. Neither does file history. File history would not back up the Windows operating system. It only backs up the files.
Can you all hear that, or does Henry need to move closer to the microphone?
Yeah, file history just goes after the main library files unless you tell it to go and get the other stuff. Time Machine does back everything up, but and it actually doesn't back up the operating system as well.
Yeah, that's Time Machine for you. And iCloud, the nice part about iCloud is it'll capture everything in like a keychain. So if you're needing passwords for the rest of the system, that's the one that will really save your go, because a lot of people store their passwords on there. The keychain is very important. So when you have iCloud for Mac users, that's critical if you need to recover any, access to some of your portals or any, information like licensing and everything on your computer.
Yeah,
File history will not do that, so just keep that in mind, and neither does OneDrive.
so for key, you have to make sure the keychain syncing is turned on
Correct.
for that to work.
There are third-party solutions on the Windows side, if you want to back up your entire machine, that will also include your passwords and licensing information for each machine. And there are other ways for other people to recover as long as you get the data from, the user folders, libraries, and the Windows side. But by far the easiest, backup system is actually the iCloud and also Time Machine. Time Machine by far is the easiest. It's just plug and play, and that's it. You turn it on, it gets everything.
The thing about the drive backups, they can go further back in time than iCloud Drive does for deleted files. Because if you delete something from iCloud, I think it's only there for 30 days. And some of the others, so you can do Dropbox and pay for more. So anyway, that's getting a little more detailed than maybe we want to get into.
Okay.
Are there any questions from anyone on the Zoom part of the presentation?
Thanks for a lot of questions.
All right, so I guess not.
One
do you
other
have
comment
any-
regarding the keychain that you brought up. I would also highly recommend utilizing a password manager, like
Yes.
LastPass or one password.
We recommend 1Password because LastPassword has some security issues on the backside that has been flagged in the security community. That's where I come from.
Yeah.
And so 1Password's or LastPass is actually on its way out.
With you being in Silicon Valley, have you noticed anything as far as like, are people leaving LastPass and migrating to 1Password, or what did you notice, Jim?
I haven't noticed that trend of, one way or another, but I use 1Password myself. And I love it. It's just a much better way to do it. Because it is cross-platform, especially if you're even cross operating systems, right? So keychain is great on the Mac, but it only works on the Mac ecosystem, where if you want to be able to go to a Windows computer and a Mac computer, you can use 1Password across everything.
It also works on mobile devices too. Just let people know.
Yeah, Windows. Yeah, okay, all right,
I have a quick one.
Jim, oh, okay. Mary has a question.
I have an NAS device. And I have replaced, I've had it for quite a while. It's a Synology. And I have OneDrive that is reporting a teeny weeny tiny problem. And the problem is, I think it's just one sector has gone bad. One sector bad on a hard drive does not make the hard drive bad, does it?
So hard drives inherently have bad sectors in them, and it has its own technology to weed out the bad sectors and plug it in, right? Synology, those types of devices tend to be very sensitive to any failure. Do you know if you're running it in a RAID 5 configuration, or what's the configuration of it?
What's the most common? What's the default? RAID 0?
So I'm not sure what the default is in that device, but how many drives are in it?
4.
So typically in a 4 drive, hopefully you'd be in a RAID 5 configuration where you
Probably.
essentially sacrifice the space of one of the drives to be a redundant
I do
drive.
believe it is a RAID 5. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I do believe it is a RAID 5, yeah.
Yeah. So hard drives are inexpensive these days. With a RAID 5, you can pull that drive out, put a new drive in, and it'll rebuild itself. And so better to do that now than wait for that drive to fail and be in degraded mode. Because when one drive fails, sometimes there's not too far off for the next drive to fail. And if you lose 2 drives in that RAID system, then you're really in the deep water.
I've seen that happen.
Well, I've replaced 2 drives within the last year, so there's 2 very new ones in there.
So replace
Yeah.
the 2 oldest ones.
Yeah, probably should, okay.
Yeah, so they're all newer.
It's just one little teeny weeny tiny sector, man, that's it, that's it.
Yeah, that's what, the defragmenter in Windows would go through and could analyze. And I think check disk, there's a function in check disk you could run through. On the Mac side, they don't really do a lot of defragging. The operating system kind of handles that on its own. But check
Well, that's
disk
a
would go
Linux
through and
system.
flag the bad sectors and tell the drive not to use that sector anymore. But
It's a
one
Linux
sec,
system in there.
or
Yeah, the
Linux, yeah,
Synology, you're on the Synology OS, right?
right.
Synology OS. Yeah, there might be some utilities for the Synology that you can check.
There are, and that's how I know about this little problem, because it tells me. But I haven't seen, I remember defragging from back in the Windows days, when I used to be familiar with Windows a little more, but I do remember that.
And do you
But
have the
I don't
Synology
know if
backed
it
up?
has- Oh, yeah.
Okay. So if
Oh,
you're
yeah.
backed up,
That makes
then you can risk it, but it's there, the
Okay.
cost of hard drives these days is not worth playing with fire. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess one more question. Jim has to go at 7:30, so I guess we can fit that in, Henry.
I have one question for you, Jim. The question I have for you is how far back in terms of technology can you recover data? Can you recover data from tape? And also the original Apple IIgs devices like the 3.5 and the 5-inch, floppies?
So tape, you can still call us, but we'll refer you to one of our partners for tape. But
Okay.
yes, floppy disks and we pretty much do all the old stuff still as well. We have, actually in our museum, we have working computers like the old Mac Plus, and I've done recoveries on the old Mac Plus that uses the 800 megabyte format floppy disk.
I
Yeah,
was just curious like how far back you go, so.
'cause it's like the only thing that reads that disk. Yeah.
Got it. All right, thank you. I appreciate it.
You
All right, Jim,
bet.
that was perfect, exactly what I wanted covered, so I thank you very much for presenting to us tonight. Thank you for your
Great.
time.
Thank you. I'm glad I could help. And remember to just give us a call if you have any questions. All right.
Okay, all right, see you
Thank
later.
you, everyone. All right.
Have a good night. Bye.
See ya.